Chapter 6. I'm still happy with the way I am, even though I'm still doing acid, etc. I don't seem to be smoking hash much anymore. I only really smoke it when I'm coming down from a trip. Talking of coming down and trips, Strawberry admitted during a deep chat with myself, Meow, and Herman, a bloke who lives in Nottingham, who likes his acid, etc., a good friend, that he was all fucked up. We got talking about counselling, etc., and I nearly got him to go, which would have been the best thing for him. But in the end, he just blamed his trip and said he was just having a bad one. I wish I could have remembered all that was said, because I think it would have been interesting to go into what I'm writing. I did do the second best thing though. I recorded a conversation that I would like to pick up on now. It is between Mr. Claypole, Gerbil, Larry, Baldrick, Rowntree, and myself. I noted down a few questions beforehand and asked them as the night progressed. Gerbil, Larry, Baldrick, and Rowntree are 4 young people who take drugs for enjoyment, and it was interesting to hear what they had to say about how it affects them in every way, as well as just taking them. The majority of the feeling is, as Baldrick says, it's a way of getting out and doing what you want, letting your mind take over, letting it say what it wants. Rowntree: I don't like the way people go on about it. It gets around too much and can lead people into a lot of trouble, even innocent bystanders. I suppose there is a worry of people showing off, maybe going over the top about it. I think there is an addiction of talking about it, which can leave people who don't do it quite out of place, especially if they don't know much about it. There is still the strength of the press and media who give off a very false impression of drugs. The picture for people who are naive about it is still the large billboards showing some vagrant wrapped in a blanket on the streets, who steals to feed the habit. We must all remember there is also a difference between habit and addiction. The feeling is still, if you take drugs, you've got a problem. Everyone in the room agreed that all drugs are addictive in one way or another. Be it pot to heroin, they can all be psychologically addictive. At one point during the conversation, I mentioned that I was getting counselling once a week. They then asked me if I was writing all this stuff to come to terms with a drug problem. I answered that writing it all down was very important to me, and I hope that it will be important to people who want to understand drugs, not just take them and know the effects. I then went on to explain there are 2 loves in my life, women and drugs. There are 3 in mine, women, music and drugs, which still carries the golden historical rebel rule, sex, drugs and rock and roll. Feelings don't seem to have changed since the 60s, except we seem to have progressed. Baldrick: drugs are a way of expressing, really. Without caring, no matter what anyone says, you have that certain thing that you can turn around and do and say whatever you want. Gerbil: I can be sat at home watching TV with my parents and turn around and say something when I'm tripping and they say, "What are you on about?" Me: do drugs worry you? Gerbil: totally, because I know there's some bastard making a lot of money out of it, and there's loads of exploitation about it. You might remember a couple of weeks ago, I nearly freaked out on acid. I asked myself why. I realised I was standing in the mixture doing fuck all. That's why. I mean that if I was in ventures, I would have just had a good time and not thought anything of it. I've done both now, and there is no way I'm going to do a trip in the pub again. The reason for this, from what I could tell, is that in ventures you can lose control without feeling out of place. In the pub, it's the opposite. Mr. Claypole: I was tripping tonight, and I couldn't sit down in the pub. Larry: all it is, why it's different being in a pub, is your mind is so conditioned. It needs something to look at that isn't so normal. Gerbil. I don't know. I just think that everyone could see the condition I was in, and I was worried that some cunt was going to freak me out, and I was out of my head, you know, like on my own, and I don't want that. Baldrick. I don't think that's everything to do with it. It also depends on your state of mind. To Gerbil. I remember when you did that trip a while ago just after Christmas, and you hyped yourself up so much. You know you were. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And when you dropped it, it hit you so fast and you freaked and just thought, what the fuck? Gerbil. The thing is now as well, I can't help myself. Mr. Claypole. There are all these people you go around with, and there's always that certain person who you always talk about drugs with. You don't talk about anything else. Larry. The thing I hate about it is society brings out your own personal substance. You know what I mean? Like you can be smoking hash and you've got that urge that you can't keep anything to yourself. Me. Has anyone tripped on their own? Roundtree. I've been tripping on my own only when I've been separated and I don't like it. Everyone seems to agree. Gerbil. I know a man who does. He's well fucked up anyway though. Me. The argument at the moment is tripping isn't like smoking blow because the only communal thing about it is everyone dropping it at the same time. There is no skinning up and smoking with friends. Mr. Claypole. The difference between a spliff and doing a trip is the spliff's for sitting around and relaxing and tripping is for getting up and going. Baldrick. I don't know whether this is a true story or not, but there was this bloke who apparently made this suit and wore it through customs and took it to Colombia or somewhere and made millions of pounds because it was covered in LSD. It's a bit hard to believe. Larry. I read this book, right, that proved LSD was all psychological. Scientists in the late 50s in America took 2 children, male and female, aged 14, and 2 elderly people, also male and female. They put them in this big mansion in the middle of nowhere. They were sat down in a room and told they were going to have LSD tested on them and that they would be staying there for a week. Except the scientist wouldn't tell them when they were being given the drug, so it might be put into their food or coffee or whatever, you know what I mean. The first day was calm, you know. The next day, they would be sat in bed and they wouldn't know whether they were tripping or not, the nurse would be acting normal, except the cornflakes would be purple and the milk would be black, on purpose, they'd put it down in front of them and observe the reaction the 4 people would give. The next day, everyone would sit down for dinner and they'd be sat there and one of the scientists would sit down with antelope horns growing out of his head. Just pretend except the people being tested didn't know. It went on like this all the way through the week. Do you know what I mean? Until it actually convinced the group that they were tripping their bollocks off. Larry does think that the drugs and the way they are used are very psychological, and yet he still does them. I think he also has to take into account that in the 50s there was not as much awareness as there is today, and it was quite an interesting story. Me? What do you reckon to acid and E being coined the designer drugs? Gerbil. It makes me think I want to try it. Roundtree. I think people overdo it. I think people get overexcited and overdo it. It's like people at college. I worry about them because with E, a friend of mine did 1.5 at the beginning, and now she says she has to do more to get off on it. She says she's going to take 3 on the next one, and I told her not to. Mr. Claypole. Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream takes 6 E's before every show when touring. That's stupid because more than 5 could kill you. Baldrick: Well, personally, I think that's like drug abuse. Mr. Claypole: Personally, half of anything is enough. Gerbil: To me: Do you think some people are designed to trip and some aren't? Me: I think it is all completely natural no matter what, whether you're designed or not. The whole thing, even the pharmaceutical drug they make in the labs, is completely natural. We as human beings are natural, and the things we do are natural. Now there are people that say, hash is natural, there's nothing wrong with a good smoke because it's herbal, it's organic. Using the drug as a plant is the excuse for taking drugs is shit. Baldrick: Even substances that make up drugs like acid, etc., originally came from plants anyway. Gerbil: I want to try all drugs out of curiosity, but when we talk about injecting, I just couldn't do that, basically because of the needle. Me: What about drugs that go down the needle themselves? Let's talk about heroin. Mr. Claypole: Apparently, you could take heroin for the rest of your life and still die of natural causes. That's enough of the group theories for a bit. Tuesday I was doing my normal gallivanting about adventures and did half an I had such a good time. Mr. Claypole and Meow tried these new tabs from Nottingham called Dragons. We'd had them the night before when Strawberry was on one of his come with me phases. And so, I went with him. That was the night when Herman came back with us, and Strawberry admitted he was fucked up. There is one thing I noticed. People were so hyped up, and I got so hyped from other people's energy. Most of Ventures was tripping their heads off. Maybe that had something to do with it. I know someone went home with a lot of money that night. Speaking of which, I will be dealing 100 tabs that will make myself and Mr. Claypole £190 each. There are a lot of things needed for the house. The way Ventures was last night, I don't think it will be too much trouble. Must be careful though. Anyway, after Ventures, I didn't go to bed until the usual morning hours when people are going to work, so I missed my appointments with counselling and the clinic. I don't think that matters because I feel brilliant. I'll be there tomorrow though, just to make sure I'm all right and offload any problems. I had also just written a letter to one of my favourite authors of the moment, Whitley Strieber, Communion and Transformation. My favourite book is Communion, which is his own true story of being abducted by visitors, aliens. It's not just the subject that intrigues me, even though I find that really interesting, but it's the way he goes about it, looking at the problem, thinking he's going crazy, thinking he's been in a spaceship and met little blue men. He looks at this problem from every possible angle. He's certainly a great influence on how I write about stuff that's going on at the moment. I am very interested in the way the man thinks and what effect drugs have had on him. Back to the theories. Gerbil E scares me. I think it would be great to do, but it scares me. Like, with trips, one time I was sat watching TV and I thought everyone on the screen were deep ones. Deep ones are from role-playing fantasy games. I've been playing fantasy games for 9 or 10 years, ever since I can remember really. I even failed my school exams because I was addicted to the games. When I'm tripping, it feels like I'm actually there. Me. But that's because there is a big part of you involved in fantasy games. And when you drop a trip, your mind is so into that hobby that it creates its own existence in that world. This is why I haven't been tripping well. Up until now. Because my hobby, if you like, was birdie, and because that's all I thought about and my mind played on it while I was tripping. Mr. Claypole. I had an out-of-body experience when I was tripping a few months ago. It was raining outside, so we all went out to get wet. Just as I was leaving through the front door, I saw myself and everyone in the street from above. Baldric. Once I sat on a fence that was only 3 feet high, I felt like I was flying. Me. Let's talk about the future. What does everyone reckon to a complete hallucinogenic drug, like places and people that don't really exist? Mr. Claypole, like virtual reality. Virtual reality is the furthest computer science has got with recreational computer games. It is as though you are inside the computer, in another dimension. It was designed by computer scientists that lived the 60s mania, acid freaks, etc. Apparently in America, there is virtual sex. Probably the safest sex in the world at the moment, apart from a couple of electric shocks. Gerbil. If there was this new drug and it was completely hallucinogenic, then anything could happen. Like VR, it scares me. It's unlimited. You could murder someone. You could rape someone. Me. But it's the centre of escapism. Like with rape, every man is a potential rapist. And every man has thought about rape in one way or another. Now, whether it's a good idea to have some sort of simulation to harness that potential rape would be a subject matter that would take a long time to determine. Gerbil. I think it will ruin lives. Mr. Claypole. There are people who spend £100 a day to play on VR machines. The machines in this country cost something like 10 quid to have a go for 5 minutes. Gerbil. I think it's interesting, but I still think it will ruin lives. Me. What do you reckon to how drugs are presented? Not how the general media presents them, but the people who make them. The designer drug? Mr. Claypole. It's great because when you buy a trip, it's good to see the picture. It's good to know there are different kinds. Like, you know they're all on the same sort of line, but they all do something a little bit different. Baldric. It's good to have a selection. I reckon, like, the penguins look nice because it's got that little picture on it from those penguin books you used to read at school. Gerbil. There's just total trendiness with drugs. I've seen the Batman, it's smart. It's like the fucking film company has invested money in it. Baldric. When The Wall, Pink Floyd, was on in Berlin, there was even Pink Floyd The Wall tabs. Roundtree. I've realised a lot of things about myself since I've been tripping. Like, I used to prat about a bit and be really girly, but now I seem to be a lot calmer. I mean, that might be me just growing. I don't know. I can also watch other people do it even though I'm tripping, and if they need help at all, or if they're confused about something when tripping, I can help them. I just feel really responsible. I don't know why. I just seem to think, I hope they're not having a bad time. I hope they're all right. I hope they can handle it. Me. When tripping in a group, you've always got to have someone like that. Do you think that one day E will be looked at like hash is today? Baldric? Obviously, because everything is advancing, especially technology and chemistry. Roundtree. They will start making even bigger drugs. Baldric. It's like fantasy. People will want better. Mr. Claypole. I think drugs will get stronger, but people will be more advanced to handle them. Me. People from the 60s say that today is a lot more advanced and psychedelic than then. Looking back at the 60s, the young person of today looks at it from celluloid view, thinking how great it was. That everyone was doing sex, drugs and music. They want to live it today. And to a certain extent, they do. Baldrick. My dad was in the 60s era. He says that if rave music had been around, then that he would have never come back to reality. He would have been off his tree all the time. Me. Does it make you feel comfortable that millions of people are doing it? Or do you find it as some sort of peer pressure? Gerbil. Yes, I do feel more comfortable knowing other people are doing it. I don't really notice the pressure because I am in the world of drugs all the time. I don't think I could escape it because it is around me all the time. I live in the world of drugs. Me. What do you think of dealers? Gerbil. I respect them for what they do, because they are selling something which is illegal that a large proportion of the population want. Roundtree. As long as they don't start pressuring people into buying them. Gerbil. I've never ever been pressured into buying drugs. I do know it goes on though. I mean, I do know people who have been threatened with knives at raves to buy drugs. I don't know how I would handle that. Mr. Claypole. Simple. Buy the drugs. Gerbil. I have honestly heard of people having their throats cut at raves. I feel there's more to it than things like that happening just because of somebody not buying drugs. I mean, for every person who doesn't want some, there is a queue of people ready to buy. And buy they do.